Many TV shows get to live their long life in the sun with many successful seasons and a devoted fan base, but others go to the graveyard of time, and the Playboy Club 2011 is one of those. Starring Amber Heard and essentially ripping off the Mad Men franchise, the Playboy Club was ill-fated from conception. So what happened behind the scenes of this forgotten show? Hi, I'm a little nervous, let's be so for real, but my name is Danica. I used to do video essays on TikTok, mostly about pop music, but I'm trying to expand into the YouTube territory to explore more of my wider pop culture niches and also get off one of the worst platforms there is on social media at the moment. So here I am talking about the Playboy Club TV show because I am a certified Playboy historian and there is no one better that could give you this information. Yet, even I hadn't heard of the show until a couple months ago, and I was astounded to discover that there was a television drama about the Playboy Clubs of the 1960s. The Playboy Club was conceived by American writer Chad Hodge around 2010. Chad Hodge had previously worked on the TV show The Runaways for the CW, which also didn't last very long. He was interested in the Playboy Club setting from the real-life 1960s as a means to explore the changing political environment of the time, the sexual revolution, the civil rights, all of that good stuff. He was also very clearly piggybacking off the success of Mad Men, which was another historical fiction and crime drama at the time, running since 2007 and one of the most popular shows on television. So many shows tried to rip off Mad Men in this era, including shows like Magic City and Pan Am. They all wanted to do the period piece thing, some of them to varying degrees of success. The Playboy Club had no degrees of success. Chad was also living in a time where the Playboy revival was so real. In the 2000s, Playboy as a brand was popping off thanks to the TV show The Girls Next Door, which followed Hugh Hefner's main girlfriends at the time, Holly, Bridget, and Kendra, in their day-to-day life living at the Playboy Mansion. Y2K fashion was all the rage and so heavily associated with Playboy. You could go to the tanning beds and get a Playboy sticker to show how deeply you tanned. You could buy Playboy bunny belly rings. Adam Sandler's production company released the movie The House Bunny starring Anna Faris in 2008. Playboy was suddenly very well recognized in society, and despite the undertones of undertones is generous, the overtones of sexual objectification of women to do with the brand, it was still very popular because the fashion and the vibes were good and the girlies were gravitating towards it because we all just wanted to connect with this cute, fun, pink, feminine vibe, disconnected from the whole part of reality that this is a magazine for men to look at naked women. So Chad Hodge comes in at this time thinking Playboy is super successful right now, Mad Men is super successful right now, let's blend these two components and we've got a hit on our hands. We'll cast Amber Heard, Lauren Benanti, Carrie Coon in like one of her first major screen roles, and that we're going to have no trouble at all, except he did. Because this is a show in the Mad Men vein, all about deep personal life secrets, crime and mob drama, socialite and political behavior. It's an in-depth character study that is inherently featuring a heavy sexual component based on being set in a Playboy club. And he sold it to NBC, who were quite famous for heavy censorship on public networks and cancelling shows when they don't really have time to find an audience because if they're not successful off the bat, NBC's over it. Nonetheless, he managed to get them to pick it up around 2011 and they began shooting that March on set in Chicago, which is only spiritually right because the original Playboy Club opened in Chicago in 1960 and that was the exact club that the show was set in. So let's do a little bit of Playboy Club history before we actually dive into the show itself. The real-life Playboy Club started operating in 1960. They were a tie-in to Hugh Hefner's recently launched nude magazine Playboy, which featured scantily clothed women on the covers and a centerfold each month of a woman posing nude who would become the playmate of that month. The magazine was obviously massively controversial for the time, but also very progressive in the articles it published on political things like transgender rights, LGBT rights in general, women's rights to being sexual beings, sexual health, reproductive rights, all that good stuff. However, if people tell you they're reading Playboy for the articles, they are lying. It is about the centerfolds. So following the magazine, we launched the Playboy Club in Chicago, which is a private club for rich, classy men to go and get a drink, have a smoke, have a nice meal, and be served by scantily clad waitresses known as the Playboy Bunnies. In modern-day settings, a lot of people will use Playboy Bunny to refer to any woman who was ever associated with the Playboy brand, but that is actually not what it means. A Playboy Bunny is specifically one of the waitresses from the now deceased clubs. At the Playboy Club's peak, there were 22 operating around the world, but by the end of the 80s, they were basically gone, a dying breed, not really relevant in that current time. Playboy did attempt to relaunch the clubs around the 2000s with the success of shows like Girls Next Door, but it didn't really go anywhere.
It's a huge deal that the first Playboy Club in over 15 years is opening up in Vegas at the Palms.
Largely because the concept of the Playboy Club today is undeniably sexually objectifying. So women were hired as waitresses to serve these men, and they were wearing very, very controversial costumes. The Playboy bunny costume we could talk about for eons because it is so iconic to culture. A very, very high-cut leotard, bunny ears, a big puffy cotton tail, cuffs and a collar. Very classy, very sexy, very creative, and undeniably legendary. The Playboy costume was so famous it ended up in TV shows and movies like Legally Blonde, Mean Girls, Bridget Jones, you name it. Any girly movie, especially of the 2000s, featured that Playboy costume because it's just so good. It's so flattering, it's so stylish, and it's so fun. But men were going to the Playboy clubs because hot lady in costume, give them beer. So the Playboy clubs kind of inherently tie themselves to the endless feminist argument of, is a woman engaging in sexual environments to earn money, empowering herself or objectifying herself? And I think there are arguments strong on both sides. Personally, I really adore the Playboy brand. I connect with its sense of hyperfemininity and freedom of choice and sexual revolution. But I also entirely understand that, it's definitely misogynistic, for sure, because the whole brand exists because of some creepy little misogynistic man. So it's definitely a both sides have great points situation. And ultimately, that's not what I'm here to talk about. We all know there's tea about the Playboy clubs. But I want to make a minor argument for them because, let's be so for real, if the Playboy clubs were around today, I cannot lie, I probably would work for one. I would hate the male attention. But I would not mind messing with their mind to make more money. I would not mind rocking it in a really cute pair of heels and a cute costume. And the reality is that, especially in the 1960s, these clubs were a fantastic way for women to genuinely earn money and gain financial independence for themselves in a time where there weren't actually that many opportunities for them to do that. Playboy bunnies were treated pretty decently for the 1960s. They had really respectable pay for the time. Depending on the bunny role in the club that you worked, you had the ability to earn a lot more with tips. And there were also a lot of work extension opportunities. For example, there was a merit system rewarding bunnies who did their job well. And if you got a lot of merits, you could be sent out on Playboy promotions, modeling for companies, socializing at paid events, or even traveling for work by going to work at international Playboy clubs. The clubs also did a great job to look after their workers as well as their brand at the same time. So there were very strict rules for bunnies in terms of cohabiting and interacting with the key holders, the men attending the clubs. Playboy bunnies could not give out their last name, home address, or phone number to key holders, so they were only known as Bunny first name. So I'd be Bunny Danica, and you'd know literally nothing about me other than that. You would not be allowed contact with me outside of the club. They were forbidden to date any staff at the club or anyone who attended the club. Anyone who was on site at the club was recorded and taken down. You knew everyone who came in and out of those doors. And each club had a bunny mother in charge of looking after all of the bunnies. Bunny mothers were typically women who started out as waitresses and then aged out of the role. So by the time they entered their 30s, let's face it, this is super misogynistic. But the Playboy brand didn't like women in their 30s still looking hot and sexy. So instead they would become bunny mothers and take charge of the girls who were still working there. They'd oversee their well-being, check in on them, make sure their costumes were up to scratch, that their mental health was in check, and that they weren't in any danger or having any issues on the job. You'd also be provided one free meal per shift, which was quite good on top of the decent pay. However, of course, there were some downsides to the job. It could be quite physically grueling, having to stand in heels and a very tight-fitting, uncomfortable costume for hours and hours on end. And the rules were incredibly strict. Bunnies had to act in highly specific ways. For instance, if you're serving food, you have to do the bunny dip, turning around in a specific angle so as not to put your breasts right in the guy's face. They had hyper-specific language and an order of events for how they would take orders, take them to the kitchen, how they would speak to guests, like super identical phrases each time. And their posture and body language rules were off the charts. For example, they were never allowed to be seen sitting in front of guests. They had to bunny perch on the back of chairs. They could not drink water in front of guests or eat. They were allowed to have a tiny little smoke and then immediately put it in the ashtray. Like, the rules were wild, and they certainly created an element of glamour, but also, wow, physically taxing as hell. They could dance with key holders if requested, but only certain appropriate dances like the Watusi. You have to read the guidebook to see all of the dances of the time that were popular and trendy, but also didn't get you too close to the boys. The vibe at the time, as described by iconic feminist Gloria Steinem, who we will be talking a lot about later, said that the moment they felt they could become familiar with a bunny, she would not have the aura of glamour that now surrounds her. So considering the time period for women, this was a decent work environment. But of course, allegations of abuse and other mistreatment have come out over time. Less than you would think, considering how sexed up and dangerous the club environment you're imagining would be. But in the documentary Secrets of Playboy around 2020, bunny mother PJ Marsden alleged that she was asked by Playboy to cover up several assaults which her employees experienced, not on site, but still during their time working there, and to do with people who were on site at the Playboy Club. So definitely some terrible stuff went down associated with these clubs, although not necessarily in them. Nonetheless, the Playboy Clubs have gone down in history for sure because they really helped the brand take off at the 60s and last significantly more than it would have if it was just a magazine. So much to do with the costume, we cannot deny it. Each bunny would be supplied with 2 costumes and matching ears, collar and cuffs, bow tie, Playboy cufflinks, bunny tail, nameplate rosette, flashlight, and a Playboy lighter. If she loses the accessories originally issued to her, she is responsible for purchasing replacements. A bunny purchases her own regulation hose, bikini panties, and shoes dyed to match each costume. So now when we get to the actual Playboy Club TV show in 2011, we all know the costumes are going to be the main point. The biggest factor that matters to Playboy historians like myself and Hugh Hefner himself, who was very fascinated and obsessed with how bunnies were depicted. The costumes in the Playboy Club TV show were designed by Isis Masendin. She was not able to track down any original Playboy bunny uniforms, so she created her own designs based on photos and consultations with Hugh Hefner himself, who originally told her the costumes she made were not high cut enough, and then she provided references and was like, "You're crazy, look at the pictures. This is exactly what it looked like, Hugh. You are so losing it in your old age." One of the most iconic bunny mothers as well, Pat Lacey, was also involved on the Playboy Club set. She got involved teaching the actors to portray the correct etiquette of the time and be historically accurate to how bunnies would behave. So she made some minor corrections on set to how the costumes would look and made sure they were doing the bunny perch, the bunny dip, all of the bunny things. However, you might think that Playboy as a brand was more involved with this TV show than they actually were. Pat Lacey was on set and Hugh had some minor involvement at the beginning, but he didn't get a lot of say in how the brand was represented, which you can kind of tell watching the show because it's all about crime taking place in the Playboy Club, and I don't think the brand overall would be too happy thinking that people perceive their clubs as dangerous, even many decades on. Playboy's entertainment company Altaloma, who were responsible for shows like The Girls Next Door and Playboy After Dark, received scripts to look over for the Playboy Club, as well as Hugh Hefner himself being granted the scripts to view, but they didn't necessarily get much of a say in changing the outcome unless it was super off or a concern for the brand overall. And interestingly, despite having fairly little involvement, Hugh Hefner was super excited about this show. He was tweeting, yes, I know, Hugh Hefner was a big Twitter fiend back in the day. He was tweeting, saying the show was going to be amazing. He was so excited about it. He even mentions it in the foreword he wrote for Catherine Lee Scott's The Bunny Years book when it was re-released in 2011. He wrote all about how the Playboy Club TV show is coming to NBC and it's going to keep the brand alive. Playboy is thriving better than ever. Which, delusional, becoming senile, clearly. Hugh also provided a voiceover narration for the first episode alone, so he kind of does a little spiel on how the Playboy brand was so thriving because of the Playboy Clubs of the 60s revolution.
The steaming, corrupt, crime-filled Windy City may have been all those things. But I built a place in the Toddlin town where everything was perfect.
Now we must get into the show itself, which is pretty wild considering only 3 episodes ever aired, and we never actually get a resolution to literally anything that happens. They were kicking off some wild plot lines, let's just say that. The main female character of the show is Maureen, played by Amber Heard. Now, I don't want to be hearing any of that shit about Amber Heard in the comments. She's just an actress, okay? None of the rest of it. Although I will say, Pat Lacey mentioned in her book that she would be offset every now and then because she was going to film a show with Johnny Depp. Notable. Interesting. Maureen is a brand new bunny at the Chicago Playboy Club who, in the first episode is assaulted by a key holder in the back room, and to protect herself from the assault, she kills him with her high heel. The only witness is Nick Dalton, who is a frequent attendee and associate of the club. He is dating the head bunny mother, and he's also currently running for mayor. But he has previous ties to the crime organizations of Chicago, so he knows that the person that Maureen just killed is in fact the son of the head of the mob. We're going to have an issue. So it's high drama, all about the crime and craziness of living in the city. And this really ties into Mad Men here, because Nick Dalton as a character is just Don Draper. Eddie Cibrian's performance is an absolute imitation of Jon Hamm acting in Mad Men. It's not great. And there's also a really poorly written love triangle going on between Maureen as the young, sprightly new bunny and bunny mother and Nick's girlfriend, Carolyn. This storyline is like the main one, but to me it's the least interesting. It's just like pretty corny, and kind of one of the reasons you can see the show didn't last very long, because conceptually this isn't very original. It's mildly interesting, but like every episode some gang guy comes up to Maureen and will be like, where were you when the mob guy died? And she's like, I don't know, I'm sexy and mysterious, I don't know. And that's kind of all we get in the 3 episodes on this plot line. One of the more interesting plots to me was one about a lavender relationship between Bunny Alice and her boyfriend, Sean. Bunny Alice and Sean are both actually secretly gay and closeted, and that's a really complicated thing in the 1960s. They're both part of a homophile organization, which is like a secret society type of situation where they can go and be gay and marry in their private time, and instead they have this public-facing heterosexual marriage. I honestly think this plotline was fairly progressive and well done for 2011, which was a complicated time for gay plotlines on TV show. I mean, this is the era of Britney and Santana on Glee. So we got a lot of negative tropes, but still, they're trying their best. There is a mild execution of the predatory lesbian trope with Alice, as in the 2nd episode, Maureen asks Alice to photograph her to be a centerfold for the Playboy magazine. And we get this whole sequence of Alice being like so super cooked, can't handle her feelings because it is so hot what she's doing. She is taking sexy pics of Maureen.
What about this?
Yeah, that's really good too.
But overall, I feel like in the 3 episodes we got, Alice's story is portrayed as quite heartfelt and difficult and really beautifully done. Her connection with Sean as a gay man and herself as a lesbian, bonding over this struggle together and getting through the 60s as they can together is super genuine. They're just 2 people protecting each other at an awful time to be who they are. Alice's plotline also decently explores her relationship with being a married woman to the public eye, working as a bunny, and the sexual progressiveness of the time. It was complicated to be a married bunny and still working in this sexy environment where people were very judgmental towards women. Like, why does she have a husband, but she's flirting with boys at the club every night? I thought that was interesting because it really touches on the idea that women can do all sorts of varying degrees of sex work and have different motivations and reasonings, and their relationships with others are affected by it in different ways. Another fascinating plotline, which doesn't get too much development, but we have to assume would have seen more had the show continued, is that of Bunny Brenda, who is aiming to be the first black playmate. Bunny Brenda is portrayed by Naturi Naughton, and she is essentially the spiritual version of Jennifer Jackson, who was the world's real first black playmate.
Hef doesn't care what color people are as long as they're interesting. No, that's not what I mean.
He's very progressive. There's even a Negro band performing here tonight.
I'm going to be the first chocolate centerfold. I am. You can't discriminate against these babies.
Brenda is a way to highlight how progressive Playboy actually was on the topic of race issues at a time where the civil rights movement was still developing. In 1960, it was considered highly unusual that Hugh Hefner did hire black women to work in his clubs and portray them in the magazine too. He was a consistent supporter of the civil rights movement, and the real-life first black playmate, Jennifer Jackson, appeared in the magazine as a centerfold in 1965, with the first black cover model taking until 1971, which is a very iconic image. And as mentioned before, one of the most iconic bunny mothers, Pat Lacey, who worked in the costuming department for this show, as well as being a Playboy bunny and mother for several years of her career, heavily highlights in her memoir, The Black Bunny Hop, just how progressive the Playboy brand was at the time for black women. She basically could not find a job, anything like it, that supported her or treated her as well outside of the Playboy world, which is very fascinating. The last storyline that really stood out to me is one that only starts in the 3rd and final, unfortunately, episode, because it is a connection to Gloria Steinem. In the Playboy Club TV show, a character is introduced in the 3rd episode known as Doris. Doris is a journalist in disguise as a bunny who was only working at the club to get tea on the situation so that she can publicly publish an expose, and she ends up unraveling gradually the murder that Maureen is at fault for. Interestingly, this is also actress Carrie Coon's screen debut. Now, the reason this storyline stands out to me is because there was a lot of drama in real life with the Playboy clubs associated with feminist Gloria Steinem. Gloria Steinem worked as a bunny for only 11 days in the 1960s, and then she published a whole expose article in her feminist essay A Bunny's Tale for Show magazine. This article made her a minor celebrity, and she was severely judged for years to come because her work as a Playboy bunny caused many people to depict her as a bimbo and reduce her feminist takes to meaningless because she had been a bunny in the past. Nonetheless, her expose was considered groundbreaking. It opened up discussion on how bunnies were objectified and actually improved their treatment in major ways. For instance, Gloria exposed the distasteful mandatory body examinations that early bunnies had to face, and as a result, the Playboy clubs discontinued those body examinations. She also made allegations against stolen tips at several of the clubs and highlighted how uncomfortable the costuming was for women working in that environment. But in my opinion, reading the essay now, you can also just feel Gloria's extreme disdain for women engaging in sex work of any depiction. She seems to take real issue with women using their sexuality to bolster their own independence and judges women for operating under a patriarchy, which is a tough topic, right? Because we've all got to find a way to live in this society no matter how it beats us down. I think her observations are often right and fair, but I don't like how Gloria's take generally seems to take issue with the woman participating in it as opposed to the men upholding and running this structure within the Playboy Club. But anyways, point being, Gloria's essay was a huge, huge moment in Playboy history and just general pop culture at the time. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you also have a journalist in disguise, Doris, in the TV show. I think it's an intentional parallel, even if she is exposing a murder as opposed to all of the drama within the club environment. Another weird notable thing about the Playboy Club TV show is they were really trying to ride off the success of musical TV shows like Glee. So their approach to this was to have modern celebrities of the 2010s portraying celebrities of the 60s performing in the Playboy Club. Because Playboy clubs in real life often had musical guests and performances on stage. So they thought, hey, we'll jump off the whole covers soundtrack and get us going up the charts on iTunes. For example, in episode 3 we have Colby Calais playing Leslie Gore, and in episode 1 we have Karen LeBlanc playing Tina Turner.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Playboy Club is proud to present Miss Leslie Gore.
Every time an episode aired, the songs would immediately drop on iTunes, hoping that they would just make waves in the music community, which they did not. Acting cast members also frequently sang because, just like real life, several bunnies would often perform on stage too. And I just must point out, because these kind of things bother me in TV shows, the show is set in 1961, but the songs were not always out in 1961, the songs that they were performing. And this just bugs me. They do this in Stranger Things all the time too, with 80s needle drops, and you can't just do the overarching decade, bro. We've got 1961 on lock. You have to do songs that were out in 1961. That was your call. Stick to it. So now you know all about the show itself. How did we get to a point where the show was even cancelled? Why was it so controversial and then low-key buried in the memories of the public? The show was off to a rocky start from the get-go because immediately when they started filming, Amber Heard's sister took a photo of her in her Playboy bunny costume and posted it on her Facebook page early in the filming process. The picture was then heavily spread around and dissected, with lots of people complaining that Amber didn't look like a bunny, that the costume wasn't good enough, that it looked cheap, basically judging anything about the show before they had any real meaningful information. This led to a negative conception off the bat, and 20th Century Fox and NBC actually banned unauthorized on-set photography as a result. Then, leading up to the show as it began getting marketed, Gloria Steinem comes back from the woodwork, and she's an old but iconic feminist at this point. She is still working hard to gain women's rights. And she called for a boycott of the show because she felt it normalized the job and normalized the objectification of women and sex work in society. Around the same time, the Parents Television Council took issue publicly with the fact that the actors had signed nudity clauses in their contract, despite the fact that there was no actual nudity on the show to begin with because NBC doesn't allow that type of drama. But the Parents Television Council were concerned that it could even be a possibility because they were making assumptions based on the Playboy brand involvement, and they were quite upset that a show associated with a nude magazine was even being made public. They considered it public distribution of pornography on public networks, which not really. But I see why you're worried. It's just not really, eh? Also, a couple months before the show started airing, the Salt Lake City NBC affiliate KSL-TV announced they would not broadcast it because they were also concerned about the objectionable content and the association with the Playboy name. So everyone's talking, and not in a good way. They have all got issues with the Playboy Club. They haven't even seen the show, but they are pissed off. In interviews, the cast and crew were all hyping it up and defending themselves. Amber Heard said she felt that it was just as chauvinistic to deny a woman her sexuality. If women are making the choice, they are not being exploited. The marketing heavily focused on successful ex-Playboy bunnies in society, people like Debbie Harry, Lauren Hutton, and Kimber Wood, who worked the job and then went on to have massively successful careers and weren't just grounded in sexuality forever. Chad Hodge also defended his show by saying, "I think there was a perception that we were trying to do something politically ambitious, or make a statement, or make this a show about empowering women," which sounds super boring to me. That sounds like a documentary, which this certainly is not. This is more like Chicago, Moulin Rouge, and all that jazz. Desperate Housewives. This is a fun, sexy soap. Clearly, they also tried to acknowledge the whole empowerment versus objectification argument with the show's marketing tagline, which was, "The men have the keys, but the women hold all of the power." So they were trying to get ahead of the feminist takes, but to be honest, I feel like they should have just owned it and accepted it for what it was and just not bogged themselves down with all of the controversy, just kind of accepted they were going to be a controversial show. Why did you not see that coming from the get-go? The series premiered in September 2011, estimating over 5 million household viewers for the first episode, but that is actually the lowest viewership among the major networks at that 10 p.m. time slot, and the ratings only dropped from there. The second episode had less than 4 million viewers, and the third and last episode dropped even further in ratings and viewers, so after only 3 episodes publicly airing, NBC cancelled the show. On October 4th, the Playboy Club was over, and the remaining filmed 4 episodes never aired even though they were completed. The show continued filming, however, for another week until October 10th, hoping that they could sell the series to another network. Hugh Hefner and Chad Hodge both voiced hope for Bravo, and fans of the show said maybe it would be a better fit for Showtime or HBO, which had less censorship and regulations. But it was not to be. And as Hugh Hefner himself tweeted, because he loved to tweet, he was very disappointed and said the show could have succeeded if it was for a more adult audience. I kind of see his point. So essentially the boring truth is that it was cancelled due to poor ratings and viewership, but certainly all of the controversies did not help. Plus, the reality is the show had a lack of originality as a period drama that wasn't really trying to do anything new. It was just trying to hop off the success of Mad Men. It picked an interesting set piece and thought that was enough to carry the whole thing. However, that set piece carried way too much baggage for the average viewer to handle. Now I just have a few things I want to point out about the Playboy Club that amused me, that I had to share, and I don't know where to structure them. I just think we have to talk about them because they're amazing. First of all, the way Hugh Hefner is represented in this show is undeniably hilarious. Hugh is in the show portrayed by an actor whose face is never seen. He's always back to the wall, talking to someone on the phone, but out of shot.
Billy Rosen. Oh, Hef. Uh-huh.
He's got shitty voiceovers by a different actor to Hugh Hefner who does the original opening monologue. Why does he have 2 voices in this world? That's just not good world building. And all of the bunnies mention Hugh like he's a close personal friend and they're partying with him and seeing him all the time. When in reality, he would have just been their boss and they low-key probably never would have met him, most of them. So that was kind of odd. But it just cracks me up every time they mention Hef or Hugh. I think some of them call him Hugh. And that just ain't right. It's just, if you know anything about Playboy, this whole vibe is just not right. And I think they should have paid a little more attention to these details. And why would you even feature him if you're not going to show his face or commit to casting him as someone? I just have to laugh, that's all. I do think other than that, this show does a great job at explaining the Playboy hierarchy and positions to outsiders and people who are unfamiliar with the brand, because it has a weirdly steep learning curve to learn about. For example, the second episode features Bunny Alice explaining the difference between a bunny and a playmate.
Naked? No. It's for the cover of Playboy magazine.
Still, Maureen, bunnies are bunnies and playmates are playmates. They're different. Bunnies wear clothes.
And the character of Carol Lynn gets a whole spiel about her role as bunny mother and what she does that's different to a regular bunny in the club. I also think the marketing for this show was really interesting and well done. Laura Benanti, who plays Carol Lynn on the show, featured on the cover of Playboy in October 2011, posing in her costume from the show, and several issues of the Playboy magazine also featured interviews with the cast, including September 2011's 20 Questions with Amber Heard. Plus, they did in-person pop-ups where you could meet the cast and pose with Playboy memorabilia and features from the show. I think that was cute, I think that was fun, and I think the marketing and costuming and shots were really glamorous and did capture the energy of the Playboy brand. I also like that the bunnies all have their own coloured costumes. The real-life Playboy clubs did have bunnies in different colour costumes. They had a whole array of the rainbow, but I think in real life there was probably less colour in the clubs than the show depicts, and I still think that's actually a good choice because I would rather have a visually engaging piece of media than 100% historical accuracy in some departments. Like, the visuals do matter, and I think that kind of bright, dreamy concept makes the fantasy come alive a little bit more. And Playboy is nothing without the fantasy, I fear. In conclusion, I really think this show could have been something. Watching it today, I actually quite enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting and fun, just like a little bit campy and didn't take itself too seriously. Even though the main crime plotline was kind of boring, you could tell where it was going to go. It was predictable. Seeing the lives of the bunnies was really engaging. There were a lot of political and social ideas that could have been well developed. And even though it's not meant to be funny, there is definitely some humor to be found in this. Like, I personally love the way they write Amber Heard's character, Maureen, to be super not like other girls. She can save herself. Like, she has a whole line about how she doesn't need a man's protection.
To get out of town.
I'm not going anywhere.
It's not safe for you here.
Well, don't worry. I can take care of myself.
And that was clearly them panicking about the inherent sexism of the show and being like, no, girls can take care of themselves. It's just so 2011 feminism in a way that I honestly adore because it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. I do just think the show was banking on the Playboy revival of the 2000s a little too hard. Sure, in the 2000s it was working out for them, but by 2010, 2011, Kendra had her own spin-off. Holly was in Vegas. No one lived at the mansion anymore that we cared about. Hugh Hefner was aging and starting to actually really seriously look like a creepy old man. Like he always did, but it was getting bad. And I just don't think that there was much audience crossover anymore from the Girls Next Door days. No one was going to tune into this show. Also, the Playboy clubs in general were not the thing in the 2000s that people liked so much. They liked the modern fashion. They liked the mansion. Being a waitress in the 60s is not quite what we were looking for. I think it's a tragedy we only got 3 episodes of this show. Maybe if they let them cook a little more, if it had time to develop, we could have had a really interesting period piece. But as it stands, we had Hugh Hefner tweeting that this was going to be a hit. He was so convinced that he was going to keep thriving. Like he wasn't just some weird little old man that no one actually liked. And that's a wrap on my first attempt at a video essay. Let me know what you thought. Hit me up in the comments if you've got ideas. I don't know how to close this without saying something like, thanks for watching my Minecraft Let's Play. So that's going to be my closing line. Bye. See you next time.